In this video, I will show you how to use Google Sheets to calculate some summary statistics or descriptive statistics. I'm using some data here from 2017 where we calculated metabolic rates of male mice and female mice. And I'm going to add another column here just for some labels. So I'll insert a column to the left here. And the descriptive statistics that I want to calculate are the mean, the standard deviation, the number of observations or the count, and the standard error. I can use Google Sheets easily to calculate these summary statistics for the mean, and I'm not really sure why that's left justified. Just to make it feel better, I'm going to left justify it instead of right justify it. So to calculate the mean, or to use any formula in Google Sheets, you're going to start out by putting in an equals. And that tells Sheets that you are going to write a formula or you're going to make a calculation of some sort. So to calculate mean, I'm going to use the formula average. And so I can just go ahead and double click on average, or click on average. And then I can select the array of data that I want to use to calculate the average, or the array for which I want to calculate the average. Once I've selected that B3 through B9, I will close my parentheses and then hit enter. And now I have a calculated mean of 5.03. I could, for the male mice, and I could type in that formula again for the female mice, but instead what I will do is I will just drag this tiny little box to the right, and that copies the formula over here to the female box. And if you look up here, you will see that it has changed the address to be C3 to C9 instead of B3 to B9. Handy little feature. Now, I probably don't want this many digits. I think 2 digits after the decimal is sufficient. So we will decrease the decimal places to just 2 digits after the decimal place. And now we have 2 different means. And we can see that there is a little bit of a difference between these 2 means. Now what we want to do is look at standard deviation. Standard deviation is a way of looking at how much variability there is in our data. And Google Sheets has a handy formula for this as well. So I type in equals and then ST. What I want is the standard deviation of a sample, because I have not calculated the metabolic rate for every single mouse out there. So I'm going to do the standard deviation of a sample. And again, I'm going to select the data for which I want to calculate a standard deviation, close my parentheses, and hit enter. Again, I want to decrease the number of digits after the decimal. Again, I'm going to drag this formula over to the right, and now I have calculated 2 standard deviations. You can see that the standard deviation, or the variability, is a little bit greater for the male mice than it was for the female mice. And as you just survey the data, you can see that it does seem like it's more spread out. It goes from a low of 1.3 to a high of 7.83. Whereas for the female mice, there was a high of 8.5, which was higher, but none of the data were less than 3.2. So it's a little bit more spread out for the males. Now the count, the number of observations, often just known as N. Again, there's a handy formula, equals count. And we will select the data. And we will close our parentheses. and we get a count of 7. And now I'm just realizing that when I dragged my formula over, I only into the second column, I only had my arrays go through cell 9, but I really actually want these for this second column to go all the way down to cell 11. So I can easily go in here and change that and go, I see that didn't do what I wanted, so we'll just escape. So I can go in here and I can just change this to C11 manually, and you can see now it's going through C11. And I want this one also to go through C11. And there we go. And so that didn't change our mean or our standard deviation too much. The standard deviation for the female mice is still less than that for the male mice. Now let's do the count. Equals count. Oops. And again, I'm going to select my data. This time I'll just go ahead and drag all the way down to 11, and we will see what it does. It tells me that there are only 7 of those cells that have data, which is correct. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, even though I asked it to give me the count of all the way down through 11. So it's just going to tell me how many of those cells have data. Now I can safely drag this over, and you can see that there is an N of 9 for the female mice. So that looks accurate. And then finally, standard error. Now, Excel does not, or Google Sheets does not have a handy formula for calculating standard error. So instead, I'm going to have to put it in. Turns out that standard error can be derived from standard deviation. Standard error is equal to the standard deviation divided by the square root of the number of observations. So I have already calculated the standard deviation. I've already counted up my number of observations. So now I'm ready to calculate my standard error, which is equal to the standard deviation. So I'll just click on the cell where I calculated the standard deviation. I will divide that by putting in a slash, and then I will divide that by the square root. So I have to put in another formula here. SQRT is the formula for square root. I can click on it. And what I want is the square root of the count. So I will click on that, and then I will close that parentheses, and I will hit enter. So there is my standard error. And you can see that the standard error, unlike the standard deviation, actually takes into account the number of observations. And the more observations there are, the smaller the standard error will be. Again, I will decrease the number of digits that are shown here. And then I will copy this formula over. And you can see that the standard error is smaller for the female mice than it was for the male mice. That's because there are more observations, but also because the data are less spread out. Now, instead of going to the trouble of typing in all of these formulas, you can also use an add-on called Data Miner, Excel Miner, Analysis Toolpak, which I downloaded. And if I start this Excel Miner Analysis Toolpak, that shows up over here on the right-hand side of my screen. And I can just select descriptive statistics. For my input range, I will select all of these cells that have data, and I want to include my labels. And I will tell the computer that I have labels in the first row. My output range, I'm going to select. I actually want it to start here for my output range. So I want my output range to be E2. That's where I want it to put my output, the data. the summary statistics. And I wanted to do summary statistics. I don't really want any of these other things, just the summary statistics. So I'll unclick all of these boxes and then I click on OK. And it says my input range is missing. So I will select my input range and then I will click on input range. And now I have selected my input range. Also notice that I have grouped it by columns. Labels in the first row, output, everything looks like it's ready, so I'll click OK. And now it has calculated these summary statistics, and I didn't have to type in all of these formulas. The mean is 5.03 for the male mice, 5.81 for the female mice. Again, you can change the number of significant digits just the same way we did before. Standard error is 0.965. Or if I change the significant figures, I get the same number, 0.97 for the male mice and 0.61 for the female mice. The summary statistics here include not only the mean, but also the median and the mode, and then the standard deviation as we calculated it, and then a bunch of other stuff that we didn't ask for, and the counts for both. So this is a little bit quicker way of calculating all these summary statistics. And that's how you use Google Sheets to do some descriptive or summary statistics.